Today I'm going to show you how to replace the starter motor on this mini excavator behind me. This particular machine is a Yanmar Vio 55, but the truth is that all mini excavators are actually pretty similar and pretty simple as well. There's just an engine that drives a hydraulic pump, and that hydraulic pump then sends pressurized fluid to the drive motors on either side and to all the cylinders to control the various functions of the machine. So if you have a different make and model, like a Caterpillar or a Kubota, then everything that we cover here should be applicable. And that's particularly true of some manufacturers, like John Deere for example, which actually use Yanmar engines in a lot of their machines. So with all of this being said, let's get into it. Alright, let me show you how this machine is behaving so you can see exactly why it needs a new starter. When I try to turn this machine on, the engine either doesn't turn over at all, or it takes about 5 to 10 seconds of cranking before the engine actually gets up and running. Take a look. No good. Before taking the machine apart, there's one thing that we need to check first, and that's the battery. And that's because the problem that I just showed you can actually be a symptom of a bad battery, not a bad starter. This machine just uses a standard 12-volt flooded lead acid battery. So in other words, it's just a car battery. When the machine is off, it should read between about 12.5 and 13 volts. So let's take a look. Okay, it's reading about 12.7 volts, which is fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the negative terminal, which you should always do before working on the electrical system of any piece of equipment. And once that's done, we'll pull the starter. Alright, we're just about ready to start taking things apart, but before we do that, let's take a look at a few drawings of this engine so that we can get an idea of where everything is at. This image right here shows the view from the back. So in other words, if you open up the rear door, you would see this right here. Down at the bottom you can see the engine oil dipstick and filter and the fill port right next to it. This right here is the fuel filter, and off to the side just above the flywheel is the diesel particulate filter. Now as I mentioned earlier, all that the engine in this excavator does is drive a hydraulic pump, which sits right here just behind the flywheel. It's not shown in this diagram, but I'll put up a picture that I took so that you can see what it looks like. All of the functions of the machine, from driving forwards and backwards to moving the arm and spinning the upper structure, are all powered by the pressurized fluid coming out of this pump. Okay, here I have a picture of the engine from the other side. And you'll notice that in this configuration, although the engine is the same, the exhaust is configured differently. Here the diesel particulate filter is placed on top of the engine as opposed to off on the side like in the previous diagram. Now in terms of performance, both configurations are the same. Which one you'd want just depends on whether the engine bay on the machine you're working with has more space top to bottom or side to side. Anyways, from this view you can clearly see the turbo, the alternator, and the starter, which is the component that we'll be replacing. And as you can see, we'll have to access it from the front of the machine. Okay, to get to the starter we have to remove this panel here right underneath the operator's seat. Alright, to remove the starter we first have to remove these two electrical lines. This one right here is the positive and then the one in the back is the negative. And then these two 17mm bolts that hold the starter to the engine. So let's do it. Alright, it's always a good idea to compare the new part to the old one before putting the new one on the machine. And that's especially true here since I'm using an aftermarket part. Now the only difference between these two parts is that the electrical terminals are spaced slightly differently. That's no big deal. We may have to bend the wires a little bit, but it'll definitely work. So let's get it on the machine. All right, now we'll reconnect the battery and see if it starts up any better. Perfect. All right, that's all there is to replacing the starter in a Mini X. Not too hard. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this content and that you found it useful. And if you did, please like and subscribe.